Hey everybody, I hope you're doing well as we're getting closer to the end of the semester. Remember that I know there's a tendency to sort of fall off at this point and try to grab everything there toward the end. But this week is our last discussion board week, which is the shorter of the assignments that we're going to be working on for the next 4 weeks. So you've got some things working in your favor. One, you're reading Gulliver's Travels, which is a prose text and about as close to modern English as we're going to get in this course, and it's fairly easy to read, and the discussion board post should be pretty easy to complete. So if you're lacking anything in work or you want to revise anything, I really recommend doing it this week, because starting next week we're going to have a more extended essay in the diversity essay, and then the following week we're going to do some secondary source research and another extended essay before we get to the final exam. So all that to say is take advantage of the opportunities that you have this week to make up your work and to get things done, so that the end of the semester doesn't catch up to you. I know you're likely hearing that from a lot of professors, but in this case it really does matter, because I want to make sure that you don't end up at the end of the semester trying to scramble to get a bunch of work done, because that ultimately is going to lead to just work that's not quite as good, or work not getting done at all. So that's just my warning for the semester, and for this part of the semester in particular. But now we're going to turn our attention to this really brilliant text. It's Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. Now, you've likely had some exposure to this at some point in your life, and or at least you've seen representations of it, even if you didn't know that it was a literary text, because you've often seen the traveling man, the shipman going on a voyage and landing in the island of the very small people, and then you see their court and all of those things. It's been a cartoon. There is a Jack Black starring in a movie not too long ago about it as well, and so it's in our cultural conversation, even if we didn't know exactly where it came from. But we now are going to read where it came from, and this author, Jonathan Swift, who is a brilliant satirist. Now, you've probably, you are familiar with satire. There's all kinds of satire around us at any given moment, where essentially it's an author asking us in some way to look at something a little bit sideways, where on the surface its presentation looks to be one way, but on the other side, it's actually pressing us to consider something a little differently, in some comedic ways, perhaps in some dramatic ways. The best example that we have of it that's still going is Saturday Night Live. Saturday Night Live is a comedy show that is consistently using satire to illustrate a larger point about culture itself. Now, oftentimes what they're going for is just a laugh, but when they're at their best, there's always some measure of seriousness in the entertainment and serious questions that they're going to be asking. And that's exactly what Swift is doing in his own work, is asking serious questions, but doing so in a comedic form, so that as we laugh, we see it, we laugh, and we giggle a little bit, but then there's a moment where the giggle flips over, where the laughter presses, and we say, oh, that's me, that's my culture, that's my society. And that's why these texts are so valuable, because they allow us, if I came straight forward and said, this is my criticism about this, and this, you can just put me on Twitter or X, and there's plenty of people doing that. But it's the brilliance of these people that kind of look at it a little bit sideways and get us to ask important questions and say, oh, they actually might have a point here. And we think about it a little bit differently through the fiction rather than through the linear approach of here's what you're supposed to do, or here's what the problem is. So that's the role of satire, and that's what Swift is heavily invested in. And one of the great things about this text is, though it was written a long time ago by our standards, long before things like the internet and social media and other stuff, what Swift has, and the perspective that he shares, continues to go on through and through and through our culture and our society. It's nothing new. Unfortunately, in a lot of ways, that we continue to see this coming up again and again. So I'm actually going to start today by looking at the discussion board post, because here is where, similarly to in other posts this semester, I'm actually going to try to give you a lot of freedom here to unpack what you think Swift is targeting. What is the most of interest to you? What's likely to happen as you read through? We're only reading through part one of where he goes to Lilliput, but you're going to read something that particularly catches your eye. And I want you to just have room to explore that here. So, in Gulliver's Travels, you have Swift choosing so many things to target, and I want to point to a couple in particular that I think are prevalent that you may choose from. If you have other options, that's okay too. But I think there's really four major points that he is targeting. First is the government and leadership of Lilliput, where we see the emperor come out in all of the bombast and all of the ceremony, and at some point but we starting to see that he's really just kind of petty, and it's only the people that really are ready to praise him that get any advancement. And so long as he can use Gulliver to advance that, then he's great. But the moment Gulliver starts to seem different, not only does he say he is a traitor, but I always thought that he was wrong. And so there's always this game with the emperor of heads I win, tails you lose. I'm never wrong. You're always wrong. Even down to the people that he elects or appoints into the various positions, the way they're evaluated is by their feats of acrobatic, how entertaining they are. And that we don't have to look too long into our own leadership in government and business and other places to see that it's not often the people who are the most successful at accomplishing their goals. It's the ones that can make the biggest show for themselves or can ingratiate themselves with the people in power the most that tend to get that power back. Gulliver also says some interesting things, number 2, about education and the family, and how it follows some strict guidelines, even to the point of saying something along the lines of, we can't trust the parents with the education of their children. And that is perhaps relevant in our culture today. It was certainly relevant in the culture of boarding schools, which are not quite as prevalent here, but the idea that the parents can't be responsible for their kids. So we have to make sure that not only do they have educational options, but we're not even going to give them the option. So what sort of role does the family play, and how culture might be taking away from the emphasis on the family as they operate? Thirdly, it's really I think the most poignant part of this text is the religious and the political groups that happen. So you have first the difference between the political groups, which are measured literally on the size of their heels. Some are small healers, which are the emperor is one, and then there are big heeled people as well. And so you can see how something something as minute or as small as the size of the heels in your shoes creates this whole cultural difference. And you can see where Swift is making this commentary about things, perhaps in where we grew up, or the color of our skin, or all of these different things that seem to matter so much. And no one wants to say it out loud, and that's probably why this text is so prevalent, is because they say it out loud. You're a big healer, and therefore I cannot trust you, or you're from this area, or anything like that. And we can see that continue to resonate. And also the religious difference between them and the country, Blefuscu, the country across the way, where it's they have this. The difference between them is not anything of consequence. It's whether or not you break the egg on the small side or break the egg on the big side. And not only does that say a lot about you, but you're also just evil and culturally inappropriate and just wrong if you break your egg on the other side. And that's the important differences that we see. What Swift seems to be after is this idea that what unites us there's a lot more that unites us than what divides us. Yet we always tend to focus on the things that divide us, and therefore we have a struggle to actually work together. And it's a really difficult thing to work through, specifically in Swift's time, but we continue to see it in our time and all the way through the 20th century. It just continues to keep happening and happening, is that the things that divide us culturally become so inordinately important to us that we cannot see the forest for the trees. In other words, we're going to focus on this very minute difference instead of the big thing that can unite us for the good of the people. And finally, the idea of law and order. Like, what are the laws and how are they established? In this case, and in Gulliver's case, there's a lot of just arbitrary application of laws. But notice that how many times when a law is applied, that the person in leadership or whomever says, this has always been the case. And this is the ancient law and right that we have based on all of these moral claims, when in reality, it's just this idea of, I don't like you because you disagreed with me, because you wouldn't do the work that I called you to do. So those are the 4 key areas that I noted. You might pick up on some different ones. There's certainly a lot going on in this text. So as you come to the discussion, and I explore the text in different ways in those reading notes, those are linear because it just walks through the chapters, but it's worth you digging in and figuring out where you might see some categories. What's great about this text is he really breaks them off into sections and says, and this essentially, this chapter is going to focus on this idea. So follow those chapter guidelines that you can follow the text in that way. And when you get to the discussion board post, you really have as much opportunity to write about whatever you want. So take any of these topics, select one of them, show how Swift questions the established practices on his own culture. And I've listed here education, policy, justice, earning government positions, or the church. And I want you to think that the important task for this post is to connect Gulliver's Adventure with one of these ideas through examples from the text, right? And that you've heard me banging that drum the entire semester, which is you've got to use examples from the text to prove your point. This is where quoting has to happen. And that's not just important for this course and this writing assignment, but it's really from this point on in any sort of writing environment where you're engaging with the topics through quoting and then supporting those quotes. We've talked often, I've left notes according in this line, the difference between showing and telling. Show me what the text says, and saying, instead of saying, Gulliver talks about that it's inappropriate, he seems to think that it's inappropriate that people get government positions by this. Instead of saying, the text says this, now this is how that, I'm explaining how that point supports my overall point. Keep putting that practice into use, because it is going to benefit you not only for this course, but throughout your writing career. So as I mentioned, this is the last discussion board post. We're going to take a look at a different text next week, and we're going to move into a different essay type, and you'll have all of that information there. So I want to kind of come back to this idea that it'd be really good for you to get anything else you want prior to the final assignments of the semester done this week, so that you can so that you have plenty of time and plenty of space to get ready for those longer assignments. I'm available, as always. If you have questions, concerns, please email me, cmoody@aum.edu. Thanks. Have a great week.